Today we are talking about the new Mage and Guardian item Staff of Myrddin yet again. I've already talked about this in the past once, and that was the first part of the Mage interaction test for this item. Today we're gonna do the second part, which will focus on the rest of the mages. But of course you don't have to watch the first part if you're after a specific mage and want to know the interactions for that one. But if he's not in this video, then he's in the other one. So the link for that will be right here. The Guardians, on the other hand, will be in a future video. A quick recap and an introduction for those of you who haven't watched the last video. What is Staff of Myrddin? Staff of Myrddin is an item in the completely new item tree, which is focused on cooldown reduction as well as unique item interactions after using your ultimate ability. These items exist for all classes. There's a hunter item, there's an assassin warrior item, there is an item for everyone, and then there's this mage guardian item. The limitation for Staff of Myrddin is quite obvious because it has 100 magical power. This was shown as 115 on the PTS originally. Apparently this was just a tooltip error and it was always intended to be 100 magical power and actually had 100 magical power. So that's worth keeping in mind, but it's still a pretty good value with a price tag of 2,800 gold. It also has a 10% cooldown reduction. So it's not the heaviest power item you can get in that region and not the highest CR item either, but the passive really makes up for that. The passive is when your ultimate ability has finished casting, your next non-ultimate ability cast within the next 10 seconds will have no cooldown, but will only deal 70% of its normal damage and healing. This can only occur once every 45 seconds. This results in a lot of unique interactions for specific mages, and that's what we're looking into. We continue with a god that I accidentally left out last time, which was Baron Samedi, and after that we will go on in alphabetical order with the next god being Hell. But Baron Samedi first, and Baron Samedi is, in my opinion, one of the better gods for this item. That is due to the fact that his abilities work exactly as you expect them to. You can use Vivid Gaze twice and deal more damage that way. You can use Consigned Spirit twice and you can get the heal and you can get the movement speed increase. Though it is worth noting that this increase doesn't stack, it just refreshes. And with a 3 you can throw out 2 snakes and get the root effect twice. I'm not sure what happens if you hit 2 targets that are close to each other and they get the overlapping effect on higher hysteria, so they get a double root. I would assume that it works and they both get rooted twice. It's just shorter due to diminishing returns at that point. Couldn't test that, unfortunately. But the reason why I believe this is so good on Baron Samedi is not because he has some crazy wombo combo like some other gods, but rather because he just overall benefits from using many of his abilities twice, as they all come with additional effects under higher hysteria, and effectively you can use the one once to get the hysteria up a fair bit, and maybe that takes you over the notch for the hysteria effect, and the second one will then get the additional effect. And 2 heals, of course, are also very nice in many situations, or if you space them out, you also can get the movement speed increased twice in an interval that is relatively quick, so you just have to wait with the heal for a little bit. He's maybe not a god tier user like Habois for this item, but especially in a utility focused build, he's definitely a strong user. With Hell, everything works as you would expect it. You can use any of your abilities twice, the heal will also work twice, and you can also cleanse allies twice. This overall makes Hell one of the stronger gods for this for sure, because she has her stance swap allowing her to use it quite often. The main downside here is that sometimes maybe you don't even want to proc it and you're using your ult so often compared to others that you don't really have a choice. You will probably constantly have this on cooldown if you want it or not, but in many situations it will just be an additional beneficial ability. You just have to be aware when it happens. Hera is a bit strange. Alzio, who also tested this, was not able to proc the effect of the ability until Argus despawned. For me it seemed to usually happen when I spawned Argus, so there must be some deciding factor around that. And then you can use your abilities multiple times. For the 3, that doesn't mean a double shield, but rather you can use a shield again after the first one runs out. The 2 can be used twice for polymorph, and the 1 can be used twice to even knock minions back as well. I don't really see that many applications for Hera, but at the same time I don't think it's terrible. It depends more on how consistently it will work in the end. The Goddess of Demonetization actually makes pretty solid use of this item, because for her, when you start using her ultimate, then the effect of the item will proc immediately, not at the end of it, meaning you can utilize the effect further in the ultimate. So what you can, for example, do is you can ult someone and then you can land the first spirit ball on them to stun them and then land the second spirit ball on them in that place where they are already stunned, and then detonate the ultimate, and in that time you will have dealt a lot of damage, which also factors in for the benefit of the ultimate itself. Not only that, if she uses Dispel Magic, she can also get 2 shields that stack on top of each other. And of course, 2 Wing Gusts in a row are also nothing fun to deal with in most situations. So overall I would say she's not the strongest god for this item, but definitely one of the stronger ones. With Janus, things are as you would expect them to be. You can use all abilities twice. This is interesting for the one because you can portal, for example, an enemy and portal away yourself, or you can portal an enemy twice and keep them locked down for a longer time, even though it seems the second time it's slightly shortened down in some way. You can also use the 2 twice, which is of course a lot of damage, and you can also use the threshold twice to stack up the threshold twice in a row, or to create a longer path where enemies won't go without slowing down. While Janus doesn't directly have an ability to abuse the mechanic of the item, I think he still benefits from it a lot. That's partially due to the fact that his Unstable Vortex is very much designed as a high base damage, high scaling ability that not that many mages have, simply because it's where most of his regular damage comes from. So being able to use that twice is just a lot of damage, and also due to the added utility that you have with your one. The downside for him is that he's also someone who doesn't really use his ultimate in a close engagement in all situations where you use your other abilities straight after. Sure, it can happen that you use an ability in the next 10 seconds if you portal into a fight, for example, but sometimes you just use your ultimate to get your team somewhere or to just go for an objective or something, and it's not always the greatest for that. So other ultimates that are more reliably used in team fights are, in my opinion, a little bit better, but still Janus is definitely not a bad god for this. To my surprise, this item actually works decently for Kukulkan. Of course, you can use it for the 1 and shoot that twice, but you can also use it for the 2 in order to get a double movement speed increase, which I didn't expect, and also, especially for the 3, meaning you can put down 2 tornadoes, which can definitely lead to a lot of zoning. What I unfortunately didn't check is if the first tornado stops dealing damage once the second one is placed, because of course the moment I placed it, it was already on the enemy and they already had the dot on them. So it might be that the first tornado actually becomes useless. I'd have to test that some more to see if that works. At the time of testing for this video, Merlin's stances didn't work properly with this item yet. That has been fixed since, but I'm unfortunately unable to open PTS. So now the ability works in all 3 stances. So for Blink, that's very straightforward. You can now use it twice in all stances. In his Fire stance, his 1 you will probably be able to use once after it's finished again, because it's a channeled ability. There's no reason to be able to stack it or something. Whereas 2 will most likely be usable twice, but will lose the damage from the first instance once the second one starts up, because that's basically the same thing for all these deployables. And I'm expecting the same thing in the Frost stance, where your 1 could simply be fired twice, and that's probably the strongest way to utilize this ability if you have Gem of Isolation and slow them beforehand already. And with the 2, the first one will probably become ineffective once you place the second one. This is just me guessing because, again, I couldn't test this, whereas the Arcane stance already worked properly. Here, the 1 will stop dealing damage once you place the second one. You can do the 2 twice, and you can even use the Blink twice, but only in Arcane stance. Overall, especially the double Frostbolt, in my opinion, makes Merlin one of the strongest users of this item. As long as you time your abilities right so that you don't take away the damage from the other and just use it after the first instant is finished, you're gonna get massive amounts of zoning potential, of objective burn, and of burst as well, so there's not really any reason not to use it. As a stance swapper, Merlin makes super good use of the passive of this item at any point because he can choose when to do it, and different from Hell, the usage is a lot more controlled when it comes to the stance swaps. The god that's completely out of control with this item is Nox. It's absolutely disgusting what she can do. She can use her root twice, of course. She can use her silence twice, and both will detonate, so you get the effect for both. And what's the biggest deal here is not the 1 or the 2, it's the 3. So what you can do with Nox is use her 2-1 combo, then after that you use your ultimate, and then you use the 3 on an ally that's nearby. Now you're in the ally, you're safe from any harm unless the ally gets killed, so you probably want to be in your tank, and you wait. You wait for the entire duration of the 3, and ideally you have 20% cooldown reduction, so 10% on top of this item, which Nox should have anyways. Once your 3 runs out, if there's still enemies around, you can use your 2-1 combo again. And then right after that, you can dash into your ally again. And then when you come out, you can use your 2-1 combo again. So you get 3 2-1 combos and almost no damage taken in between. Of course, if you get locked down hard, you might have an issue, you might have to pop your beats at least. But overall, this will mean that you can spend the majority of a team fight hiding in your tank, being completely invulnerable to any attacks, and just coming back out when your combo is ready to be used. That is probably the most frustrating thing you can do to any assassin who's trying to take you down. The moment you appear, you can even silence and root him anyways. So definitely one of the best guards for this. For Nuwa, don't build this. You can use it for her 3. It doesn't work for the 2 because the first minions despawn once you spawn the second ones, and it doesn't work for the 1 because the first fog despawns when you spawn the second one. So absolutely not worth it in any regard. For Oleron, it works for every ability, but the question is really, what would you want to do with it? Maybe using the 1 twice can be quite nice in some situations, maybe the 3 if you really want to push an enemy far away, but overall I don't see that many overly effective applications. What's nice is that it happens at the start of the ultimate, so you can then use your double ability right away, so maybe using the 1 twice might be beneficial sometimes. With Poseidon, you can actually utilize this with all of his abilities. You can use the wave twice, you can use the 2 twice in a row, or you can use it double. If you use it double, then you only get 1 extra damaging effect, but your movement speed is increased double, and your 3 will utilize it twice as well, and it seems like it even increases the pull of the whirlpool. So basically it's 2 overlapping pulls, making it really hard for enemies to get away. At the same time, typically you're going to use the 3 before you use the ultimate and not after, so that limits the application a little bit more. For Ra, the usability is somewhat restricted. His 1 will work as intended and you can use 2 beams right after each other. His 2 will also work twice, but the second instance can only be used after the first one is finished, so you can't just double spam the 2. And for the 3, you can only have 1 of those at a time, so you have to use them when the first one runs out, otherwise the second one will remove the first healing. Overall, he's obviously not the best for this item, but I think the combo of the ultimate plus 2 ones is still something worth keeping in mind in terms of raw high damage output. And he's one of the guards who can relatively freely use his ultimate at any point of the fight, meaning he can benefit from that passive a little bit more often than many other guards. With Ragin, you can simply use his 1 twice after each other for quite a fair bit of damage. You can not stack Raichu twice on a target, so the second one will override the first one, unless of course you use them after each other and proc it in between. And you can use his 3 twice, which I guess adds some utility. Overall, it doesn't seem super useful to me in most situations at least, because with him you don't necessarily use the ultimate first, you often want to have Raichu on the target or something before you do that, and also many of his abilities don't get the same high amounts of benefits that other guards do. Still definitely not the worst guard for this item. Speaking of worst guard for this item, we definitely have a contender for that with Scylla. Yes, you can use this, which is already kind of something you will not do in most cases in the first place, because with Scylla you typically use her other abilities first and then use her ultimate to take down the enemy and finish them off and get the reset. But even if you use the ultimate first, you get 2 hits on the 1, so you can root 2 targets, that's great. And that's literally it. The 2 doesn't work for it, the crush doesn't work for it, somehow this deployable only works once, maybe that gets fixed in the future. And the 3, the Sentinel, has the same issue, it also only works once, you can just not get this double proc at all. Last minute update to Scylla, her 3 has now been fixed and is apparently working properly. I'm not sure if that's the case for the 2, there was no note of that, and again, I couldn't test it. But the point remains the same, I don't think that Scylla is a very good guard for this item, because with Scylla you always want to use your 1 and your 2 before you go into the ultimate, as long as you're fighting a single target. When you're fighting multiple targets, you're even relying more on the ultimate anyways, or if somebody else damages the target first, you are going to use your ult last in most situations anyways, and when you don't, then you're gonna get the execute and you're gonna get another ult and you might not even have time to utilize the passive of this item properly. So I don't think there really is any reason to build it on her, because the benefit is super minimal, even if the crush effect is fixed compared to some other guards here. The Morrigan, on the other hand, is a very interesting god for this item. I originally wasn't even sure it was gonna work, but it actually does work pretty decently. If you use your ultimate, then you transform into another god, and once you return back into your normal form, this effect gets activated. So you can use your 1 twice to stun someone and then stun them again. You can use your 2 twice to have the Dark Omen effect applied to them, and then proc it yourself with another Dark Omen, which I think is pretty neat. But obviously not necessarily the highest damage efficiency because you use the secondary effect from the second Dark Omen that way. But hey, it's a ranged extra proc, so it can still be nice. The most interesting application is probably her escape though. Because what you can do is you can use your decoy as usual, and then when it runs out you can use your stealth on your decoy again. Or you can use 2 decoys while in stealth. So you send out 1 decoy and you go into stealth, and then you send out another decoy. And you remain in stealth for this, and it will be super confusing to enemies that don't pay close attention to your build because they see the first decoy and then take that one down and think, okay, that must be her now running over there or whatever. And then turns out it's not you either because you're just sending out another decoy. And I think that is super cool, even though it's not necessarily the highest damaging application of this item here. It also helps that Morrigan generally benefits from the stats she really likes. CDR and high power helps her too. Her biggest problem is that her ult cooldown can be relatively long. Sol is an interesting one as well. I didn't expect this, but she actually makes pretty decent use of this item. When you use her first ability, Radiance, both area effects will proc simultaneously, but with how quickly it fades away, it doesn't really feel like it's super impactful. It also will increase her heat twice, meaning you could basically go right up to 100% of your heat levels, even if you don't have this ability maxed yet and you're at an earlier point in the game. In late game, that's somewhat semi-beneficial. It's arguable if that's even worth it, because you get to almost max heat with a single proc, but it's still worth keeping in mind at least. You can also use her 2 twice, which not only makes for some pretty hefty AoE damage, but also a decent amount of extra CC through the slow. So that's useful, but you have to be careful here, because if you use the 2 right after you used it for the first time, so you activate it again right after, then it will actually glitch out and the second 2 will simply disappear. So you have to wait until this first Stellar Burst has completed before you use the ability again, otherwise you just wasted the effect. And her third ability, the Separate, also works twice in a row. You can't stack them because while you're using the ability it counts as active. You can only use it again after it's finished. But still, this gives you a massive frame of immunity in multiple ways, which I think is fantastic for an ADC especially, or an ADC mage, where you can basically get almost a free double Aegis, because often enemies will wait out you to Separate to attack you, and then you just go into the next one and keep them chasing. As Sol can also use her ultimate to engage into a fight and play aggressively with it, I think she's overall a great user for this item, better than the other ADCs. If you're a Thoth main and you are hoping for this to be the return to the spotlight for Thoth, prepare for a lot of disappointment. His 1 does utilize the effect, which I guess is the best part, but it has some weird glitchy interaction. So only if you have Staff of Myrddin, the 1 will get some internal cooldown after each shot for the first 3 shots, meaning it delays getting those shots out, and only the 3 shots afterwards will actually function normally. And with the 2 you can dash twice, that's no surprise, but you also have to fire your damaging ability in between, so it's only semi-useful in that regard as well. And the 3 doesn't even work twice because the first barrier will disappear the moment he plays the second one. So overall he has a lot of lackluster interactions. And I also don't think you want to use his ultimate early in a fight that often, unless you're like behind a wall or something and you're setting up a snipe. But most of the time it's an ability you use to clean someone up more than anything, or using it to bait something out. So in my opinion, Thoth is one of the relatively poor users of this item. And the same can be said for the next god, Vulcan. First of all, how often will you actually use your ultimate to engage in a fight? It is a long-range cleanup, and often you might not even be close to the range of the target that you want to hit with an ability by the time the effect runs out. You can use the 3 twice, which is probably the biggest benefit here because you can knock back a target twice. You cannot place 2 turrets for the 2 because it's a deployable, so you can only put down 1. And the 1 can be used twice as an escape to some degree, I guess. But if you want to hit someone and damage someone with it, they have to basically follow you down the road, and I really don't see that happening right after using their ult all too often. So I don't see all that much benefit in this item for Vulcan. Zeus is a more interesting case. Of course, there are many times where you want to use the 2 and the 1 to set up the slow and hit the enemies reliably before you use your ultimate, to confirm them in the ultimate as long as possible, which makes that aspect a bit unfortunate. But I think there are also enough situations where you can engage with the ultimate, especially in team fights. You can use your 3 multiple times, but that only works as long as you restack the bolts on the enemy. So that is not all that beneficial in most situations, unless you can throw your ultimate, then detonate, and then use your 2-1 combo right after. Which can happen, but that's not really the regular case. His 2 also is only semi-beneficial because you can use the 2 after the first one is finished and not at the same time. So yeah, you just throw it out once it's done. But the real big deal for Zeus is definitely his 1, the Chain Lightning. Using the ultimate into a double Chain Lightning is going to be absolutely devastating, absolutely disgusting for most teams to deal with, because it's so much area denial, so much AoE damage if they're a little bit too close together, and especially around objectives, this is going to be super painful to deal with. And I think that alone makes this a good item for Zeus, even though he might otherwise not be the perfect candidate for it based on the other abilities he has. It's also worth noting that the staff activates at the beginning of his ultimate, so that's very beneficial. Last but not least, we have Shank. Now, Shank is a bit awkward because for him, the opposite of what happens for Zeus is true. He uses his ultimate, and after the ultimate finishes, the staff gets activated. That is often a time where you already used all your abilities. You want to use your CC while the enemy is being ulted, so you can keep them in the ult, and that means your 1 and your 3 most of the time. So the benefit is already relatively limited. On top of that, keep in mind that using the 2 twice in a row without having the expose evil stacks on the enemy doesn't really do all that much. It's really not that great. It's just a little bit of damage. And then with the 3, you will have the diminishing returns on the stun, meaning you are basically stunned in your animation much longer than the enemy is actually stunned. You can see that here, where even on the first animation, the enemy gets out of the stun before Shank's animation is completely finished, and until you actually get into the second stun, there's such a big time frame, so unless you absolutely want to disrupt someone in that moment, there's not much of a point. So the only one here that is a bit more beneficial is Expose Evil, the 1, which you can use twice as well, and it will actually tick simultaneously for extra damage. But again, the problem is most of the time you want to use your 1 on a target while you're in your ultimate and not afterwards. If you use it right at the start of your ult, you may be able to use it again right at the end of the item effect. That could somehow work, but really, I don't think he is a great pick for this item compared to many others. Below average, in my opinion. And that is it for the mages. Sorry this video took so long. You can tell there was quite a bit of research that had to be done, but I also was super busy with moving, as I talked about before. So yeah, more about that later, but if you want to see the Guardian video soon, let me know as well in the comment section. And if you're new to the channel, then feel free to subscribe if you want to see a notification for the Guardian video too. Thank you very much for watching. I hope this was interesting and insightful, and I hope to see you for the next video soon. Can't promise a little bit tomorrow, but I will try my best. DukeSloth, out.